The scream tore from Emma's throat before she could stop it, echoing across the endless Wyoming plains as another contraction ripped through her swollen belly, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was going to die out here alone. She collapsed against the gnarled trunk of a cottonwood tree, the only shelter she had found in 3 days of walking. Her shoes, already worn thin when she started this desperate journey, had given out completely yesterday morning. Now her feet were wrapped in strips torn from her petticoat, blood-stained and filthy. The August sun of 1883 beat down mercilessly, turning the world into a shimmering haze of heat and desperation. Emma pressed both hands against her stomach, feeling the baby shift and kick, and bit down hard on her lower lip to keep from crying out again. She had no water. The canteen she had stolen from her husband's body had run dry this morning. No food either, not since she had finished the last of the hardtack 2 days ago. Her husband, dead these 4 days now, had led them into this wilderness with promises of gold in the Bighorn Mountains, away from the failing farm in Nebraska that could no longer support them. But Samuel had always been better at dreaming than surviving. When the fever took him, burning him up from the inside in less than 48 hours, he had left her with nothing but a broken wagon wheel, a lame horse she'd had to abandon, and a belly 7 months full of child. Emma had walked because the alternative was sitting beside her husband's shallow grave and waiting to die. At 22 years old, she had already buried a stillborn daughter, survived 2 hard winters, and endured a marriage that was more duty than love. She would not give up now, even if her body was telling her otherwise. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when Emma heard the sound of hoofbeats. At first she thought it was delirium, the kind of cruel trick her mind might play after 3 days without proper water. But the sound grew louder, more distinct, accompanied by the creak of leather and the jingle of spurs. She tried to stand to make herself visible, but her legs refused to cooperate. Another contraction seized her, and this time she could not hold back the cry. The horse appeared first, a big bay gelding with kind eyes and a dusty coat. Then came the rider, swinging down from the saddle before the horse had fully stopped. Emma saw boots, worn but well cared for, and legs in canvas trousers. She forced her gaze upward and found herself looking into the most striking face she had ever seen. He was young, perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck beneath his wide-brimmed hat. But it was his eyes that caught her, a deep, warm brown that widened in shock as he took in her condition. He had a strong jaw, shadowed with several days' worth of stubble, and a mouth that looked like it smiled often, though it was set in grim lines now. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. "Ma'am, what happened? Where's your people?" Emma tried to answer, but her throat was too dry. She managed only a rasping sound before another contraction hit. Her whole body went rigid, and she felt the cowboy's hands on her shoulders, steadying her. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and calm despite the alarm in his eyes. "Easy, I've got you. My name's James Cartwright, and I'm going to help you. First thing, we need to get some water in you." He moved with swift efficiency, reaching for the canteen that hung from his saddle horn. A moment later, he was pressing the opening to her lips, supporting her head with his other hand. "Slow sips," he instructed. "I know you want to gulp it down, but slow sips will sit better." The water was warm and tasted of metal, but it was the most glorious thing Emma had ever experienced. She forced herself to follow his instructions, taking small mouthfuls and letting them trickle down her parched throat. After a few moments, she found her voice. "My husband," she croaked. "Dead. 4 days back. Fever." James's expression shifted, sympathy and understanding flooding his features. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "That's a hard thing. And you've been walking since then?" Emma nodded. "Wagon broke. Horse went lame. Had to leave everything." "How far along are you?" James asked, his gaze dropping to her belly. 7 months, Emma said. "At least I think so. Could be more. I've lost track of time." James was quiet for a moment, and Emma could see him thinking, calculating. When he looked at her again, there was determination in his eyes. "Nearest town is Casper, about 30 miles east. Nearest homestead I know of is the Patterson place, maybe 15 miles north. But, ma'am, I don't think you can make either of those distances on foot, and I'm not sure my horse can carry us both that far, not in your condition." "Then leave me," Emma said, surprised by how calm her voice sounded. You found me, you gave me water. That's more kindness than I had any right to expect. Go on to wherever you were heading." James looked at her like she had just suggested he sprout wings and fly. "I'm not leaving you," he said firmly. "That's not even a possibility. What I am going to do is make camp here for the night. This spot has water nearby. I can hear the creek, and that cottonwood will give us some shelter. Tomorrow morning, we'll figure out our next move. But right now, you need rest, food, and more water. Can you hang on a little longer?" Emma wanted to tell him he did not have to do this, that she was not his responsibility, but the words would not come. Instead, she found herself nodding, relief flooding through her so intensely that tears sprang to her eyes. James saw them, and his expression softened. "Hey now," he said gently. "You're safe. I promise you, I'm not going anywhere." He was true to his word. Within minutes, he had unsaddled his horse and hobbled it where it could graze. Then he disappeared into the brush and returned with his arms full of dead wood for a fire. Emma watched him work, her mind struggling to process this turn of fortune. Just an hour ago, she had been preparing to die. Now, here was this stranger, this cowboy with kind eyes, building her a fire like it was the most natural thing in the world. James got the fire going quickly, his movements practiced and sure. Then he pulled a pot from his saddlebags along with a packet wrapped in oilcloth. "It's not much," he said, "but I've got salt pork, beans, and some cornmeal. I can make us a decent supper." "You don't have to share your food," Emma protested weakly. James looked at her, one eyebrow raised. "When did you last eat, ma'am?" "Emma," she said. "My name is Emma, Emma Hartley." "Emma," he repeated, and somehow it sounded different when he said it, warmer. "When did you last eat, Emma?" 2 days ago, hardtack." "Then yes, I do have to share my food," James said matter-of-factly. "Now, can you walk at all? Because that creek is just down this little slope, and I'd like to get you cleaned up some if you're able. If not, I'll bring water up here." Emma tested her legs and found they would support her, barely. "I can make it." James moved to her side immediately, offering his arm. Emma took it, feeling the solid strength of him beneath the worn fabric of his shirt. He was tall, she realized, several inches over 6 feet, and built like someone who had spent his life doing hard physical work. But his touch was gentle as he guided her down the shallow slope to where a thin stream burbled over smooth stones. "It's not deep enough for a proper bath," James said, "but you can at least wash your face and hands. I'll give you some privacy and go fill our canteens in the cook pot." He moved downstream, turning his back to give her space. Emma knelt beside the water, watching it flow clear and cold over the rocks. She splashed it on her face first, gasping at the shock of coolness, then cupped her hands and drank deeply. The water tasted of minerals and stone and life. She washed her hands, watching days of dirt and dried blood swirl away in the current. Then, checking to make sure James was still facing away, she pulled up her skirt and unwrapped the filthy rags from her feet. The sight made her stomach turn. Her soles were raw and blistered, several cuts showing signs of infection. She eased her feet into the water and had to bite down on her fist to keep from crying out. The cold was excruciating, but she knew it was necessary. She washed them as gently as she could, watching the water turn pink. "You all right over there?" James called without turning around. "Yes," Emma managed, "just cleaning my feet." "Are they bad?" There was no point in lying. "Yes. I've got some salve in my pack," James said, "and clean bandages. We'll get you fixed up after supper." By the time they made it back up to the fire, full dark had fallen. James had spread a bedroll on the ground for her, positioning it close enough to the fire for warmth, but not so close as to be dangerous. He gestured for her to sit, and Emma lowered herself gratefully onto the blankets. They were worn but clean, and they smelled of sage and wood smoke and something else. Something that was distinctly masculine and not unpleasant. James busied himself with cooking, and Emma watched the play of firelight across his face. He had strong features, she thought, the kind that would age well. There was a scar along his jawline, thin and white, and she found herself wondering how he got it. His hands moved with practiced ease as he prepared their meal, and she noticed that his fingers were long and capable, calloused from years of rope and reins. "You work cattle?" she asked, her voice stronger now that she had water in her. James glanced up, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "Is it that obvious?" "The way you move," Emma said. "My father worked cattle before he took up farming. You have the same way about you. I've been cowboying since I was 15, James said. Worked ranches all over Wyoming and Montana. Right now, I'm heading back to the Circle M Ranch near Casper. I've been riding fence lines and checking on our summer pastures up in the mountains. That's where you were coming from? The mountains? Yes, ma'am. Been up there about 2 weeks. I'm running a few days late getting back, but the foreman won't mind. He knows the work takes as long as it takes. He stirred the pot, then looked at her again. What about you? Where were you and your husband headed when he took sick? Emma told him the story, all of it. Samuel's dreams of gold, their failing farm, the desperate decision to head west with almost no supplies or planning. She told him about the fever, the days of helpless watching as her husband burned and shivered and finally stopped breathing. She told him about burying Samuel in the hard ground, about starting to walk because staying meant dying, about running out of water and food and hope. James listened without interrupting, his face grave in the firelight. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met." Emma laughed, but it came out bitter. "I'm sitting here half dead with infected feet and no prospects. That's not strength. You walked for 3 days pregnant and alone through country that kills grown men with full packs and good boots," James said, his voice intense. "You didn't give up when giving up would have been the easiest thing in the world. That's strength, Emma. Don't sell yourself short." Something in his words made Emma's throat tighten. She looked away, blinking hard. "I didn't feel strong. I felt terrified." "Strength isn't not being scared," James said. "It's being scared and doing what needs doing anyway. My mother taught me that." "Your mother sounds wise." "She was." James's voice went soft. "She died when I was 12. Cholera." "I'm sorry." He nodded, accepting the sympathy. "My father followed her 6 months later. Couldn't live with losing her. Left me and my little sister on our own. We made it, though. She's married now, living in Cheyenne with a good man. Has 2 children. I see them when I can." The beans and salt pork were ready, and James served Emma first, handing her a tin plate piled high. She had not realized how hungry she was until the smell hit her, and then she was eating like a starving animal, barely tasting the food in her desperate need to fill her empty stomach. James watched her with something like satisfaction, then filled his own plate and settled across the fire from her. They ate in companionable silence for a while. The food was simple but good, seasoned with salt and cooked over open flame. Emma felt strength flowing back into her limbs with each bite. When she finally slowed down, she looked up to find James watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Thank you," she said. "I know I've said it before, but I mean it. Thank you for stopping. Thank you for helping. Most men would have ridden on." "Then most men are fools," James said bluntly. "And I wasn't raised to leave people in need." "Still, you didn't have to, and I'm grateful." James nodded, then set his plate aside. "Let me see those feet now." Emma hesitated, suddenly aware of how intimate it was to let a strange man tend to her feet. But practicality won out over propriety. She was alone in the wilderness with no one else to help her. And if her feet got worse, she would never make it to anywhere. She extended her legs, and James moved closer, bringing his saddlebag with him. He worked in silence, his touch surprisingly gentle as he examined the damage. Emma watched his face, seeing the concern that creased his brow. "These are pretty bad," he said finally. "But I don't think infection has set in deep yet. The cold water was good. Now we need to get some salve on them and wrap them proper." He pulled out a small tin and opened it, releasing the sharp smell of herbs and lanolin. "This is my own mix," he explained. "Learned it from a Shoshone woman who worked at the ranch where I first started cowboying. It's good for cuts and burns, and just about anything else that ails you." His hands were gentle but sure as he applied the salve, working it into her damaged skin with care. Emma tensed at first, expecting pain, but his touch was so careful that it barely hurt at all. Then he was wrapping her feet in clean strips of cotton, his fingers deft and practiced. "You've done this before," Emma observed. "Had to patch up my share of cowboys over the years," James said with a slight smile. "Plus my sister was always getting into scrapes when we were young. I got good at bandaging." When he finished, he sat back on his heels and looked at her. "That should help. But Emma, I'm going to be straight with you. You need proper medical care. A doctor needs to look at those feet and check on the baby. And given what you've been through, I think the sooner the better." Casper is 30 miles, Emma said. I know, and normally I'd say we could make it in a day, maybe a day and a half. But in your condition, I don't think pushing that hard is wise. So here's what I'm thinking. We rest here tonight, good and proper. Tomorrow morning, we'll head for the Patterson place. It's closer, and Mrs. Patterson is a midwife. She's delivered half the babies in this part of Wyoming. She can check you over, make sure everything is all right with the child. Then, when you're stronger, we can figure out the next step. Emma wanted to argue that she did not want to be a burden, but the truth was she had no better plan. And the thought of being checked by a midwife, of knowing whether the baby was truly all right after everything she had been through, was too appealing to resist. All right, she said quietly. The Patterson place. Thank you, James. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his face, making him look younger and surprisingly handsome. You don't need to keep thanking me. I'm just doing what's right. Maybe so, Emma said. But right now, that means everything to me. James busied himself with cleaning up from supper, then added more wood to the fire. The night had grown cold, the way it did on the high plains even in summer, and Emma was grateful for the warmth. James pulled a second bedroll from his saddle and spread it on the opposite side of the fire, giving her privacy and space. You should try to get some sleep, he said. We'll want to start at first light. Emma nodded, lying back on the bedroll. Above her, the Wyoming sky was an impossible sweep of stars, more than she had ever seen in her life. She thought about Samuel, buried back along the trail, and realized with some guilt that she felt mostly relief that he was gone. Their marriage had been arranged by their families, practical rather than passionate. He had not been cruel, but he had not been particularly kind either, and his impulsive decision to chase gold had put them both in deadly danger. Now, here she was, rescued by a stranger who showed her more gentleness in a few hours than Samuel had in 2 years of marriage. She glanced across the fire at James, who was settling into his own bedroll. In the firelight, his profile was strong and beautiful, and Emma felt something stir in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude. She pushed the feeling away. She was a pregnant widow who had been found half dead on the trail. James was simply a good man doing a good deed. Anything else was foolishness and vulnerability talking. Still, as she drifted toward sleep, lulled by the warmth of the fire and the knowledge that someone was watching over her, Emma could not help but feel that something had shifted in her world. She woke once in the deep part of night to the sound of coyotes calling in the distance. Her heart jumped, fear flooding through her. But then she saw James sitting up by the fire, his rifle across his knees, keeping watch. He must have sensed her movement because he turned and met her eyes. Go back to sleep, he said softly. I've got watch. And Emma, feeling safer than she had and longer than she could remember, did exactly that. Morning came with the smell of coffee and the sound of James moving around the camp. Emma opened her eyes to find pale dawn light washing across the plains, turning everything soft gold and pink. Her body ached in 1,000 places, but the desperate weakness of yesterday had eased. The baby kicked, strong and insistent, and Emma pressed her hand to her belly, relief flooding through her. Morning, James said, appearing in her line of sight with a tin cup steaming in his hand. Coffee. It's strong enough to strip paint, fair warning, but it will wake you up. Emma pulled herself to sitting and accepted the cup gratefully. The coffee was indeed strong, bitter, and hot, but it was exactly what she needed. She sipped it slowly while James prepared a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush, sweetened with a little molasses. It was not fancy, but it was hot and filling, and Emma ate every bite. How are your feet feeling? James asked as they ate. Emma flexed them experimentally. They were still sore, but the sharp pain had dulled. Better? Whatever is in that salve of yours, it works. Good, because we've got some ground to cover today. Now, I've been thinking about the best way to do this. Normally, I'd have you ride and I'd walk alongside, but that's going to be slow going and hard on you. So I figure we'll both ride. It'll be cramped and not exactly comfortable, but Lucky here is a strong horse. He can carry us both, especially if we go steady and give him breaks. Emma looked at the big bay gelding, who was currently tearing at grass with evident enjoyment. Are you sure? I don't want to hurt him. Lucky's carried heavier loads than one cowboy and one lady, James assured her, and we'll take it easy. Besides, Patterson's place isn't that far as the crow flies. We should make it by early afternoon if we don't run into trouble. They broke camp efficiently, James doing most of the work while Emma stayed seated, conserving her strength. When everything was packed and the fire thoroughly doused, James helped her stand. Her feet protested, but the bandages held firm, providing cushioning and support she desperately needed. "All right," James said, leading Lucky over. "I'm going to mount up first, then pull you up behind me. Put your arms around my waist and hold on. If you need us to stop for any reason, just say so." He swung into the saddle with easy grace, then extended his hand down to Emma. She took it, feeling the strength in his grip as he hauled her up behind him. It took some maneuvering to get settled, especially with her pregnant belly, but finally she was situated, her arms wrapped around James's waist and her head resting against his broad back. "You all right back there?" James asked. "Yes," Emma said, though she was acutely aware of how close they were, how intimate this position was. She could feel the warmth of him through his shirt, could smell the scent of him, leather and sage and clean sweat. Her heart beat faster, and she told herself firmly it was just the situation, the strangeness of being this close to a man who was not her husband. James clicked his tongue, and Lucky started forward at a gentle walk. The motion was rhythmic and soothing, and Emma found herself relaxing into it, her body fitting naturally against James's. They rode in silence for a while, crossing the open plains under a sky that was already heating up toward another scorching day. "Tell me about the ranch where you work," Emma said after a while, wanting to fill the silence with something other than her own confusing thoughts. "The Circle M?" James's voice was warm with obvious affection. "It's a good outfit. Been around since before the war, run by the Morrison family, though old Thomas Morrison mostly leaves the running of things to his son Jack now. We run about 3,000 head of cattle over the summer, plus horses. I'm one of the senior hands, which means I get the more complicated jobs. Fence riding, checking the far pastures, breaking horses, that sort of thing. Do you like it?" "Most days, yes. It's hard work and the pay isn't great, but I like being outside. I like working with the animals. And the other hands are good men, for the most part. It's as close to family as I've had since my sister married and moved away." "Do you ever think about having your own place?" James was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I've got some money saved. Not much, but some. I've thought about maybe filing a homestead claim somewhere, building something of my own. But ranching is easier with help. And I don't have a wife or family to work alongside. So for now, I'm content where I am." The mention of a wife sent an odd pang through Emma's chest. "No sweetheart waiting for you back in Casper?" She felt, rather than saw, James shake his head. "No, there was a girl once, few years back, saloon owner's daughter in Cheyenne. But she wanted city life, and I wanted open country. We wanted different things, so we went our separate ways. Haven't met anyone since who made me think about changing my mind." They rode on, the sun climbing higher. Emma found herself studying the back of James's head, the way his dark hair curled against his collar, the strong line of his neck and shoulders. She thought about what he had said, about not having family to work alongside. She thought about his kindness to her, a stranger in desperate need. And she thought about the way her heart had skipped when he smiled. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "You are a widow of 4 days. You have no business thinking about another man, especially not one who is helping you out of pure goodness." But her rebellious heart did not seem to be listening. Around mid-morning, they stopped to rest the horse and allow Emma to walk around some, stretching her cramped legs. James helped her down, his hands spanning her waist, steadying her. For a moment they stood very close, and Emma looked up to find James gazing down at her with an expression that made her breath catch. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice rougher than usual. "I'm all right," Emma managed. "Better than yesterday." "Good, that's good." But he did not move away immediately, and neither did Emma. The moment stretched between them, charged with something neither seemed willing to name. Then the baby kicked hard, and Emma gasped, her hand flying to her belly. James stepped back immediately. "Are you all right? Is something wrong?" "No," Emma said quickly. "The baby just kicked. Quite hard, actually. Here, feel." She took his hand before she thought better of it and pressed it against her stomach. For a moment, nothing happened, and then the baby kicked again, right under James's palm. His eyes went wide with wonder. "That's amazing," he breathed. "I've never felt that before." "You've never felt a baby kick?" "I've been around pregnant cattle and horses, but never a pregnant woman," James admitted. He looked almost embarrassed. "Is it always that strong?" "This one is particularly active," Emma said. She was still holding his hand against her belly, and she realized belatedly how forward that was. She started to pull away, but James kept his hand there a moment longer, his expression soft. "Your baby is strong," he said quietly. "A fighter, like the mother." Emma's throat went tight. "I hope so. This child has already been through so much." "And you'll get through the rest," James said with conviction. "I'll make sure of it." They remounted after Lucky had rested and drunk his fill from a shallow stream and continued north. The landscape changed gradually as they rode, becoming slightly more rolling, with more trees and scrub brush. Emma dozed off once, her head resting against James's back, and woke to find his hand covering hers, where they rested against his stomach, holding her secure. It was just past noon when James reined Lucky to a stop on top of a low rise. "There," he said, pointing. "See that smoke? That's the Patterson place." Emma looked where he indicated and saw a thin column of smoke rising into the clear air. As they drew closer, she could make out a sturdy log cabin with a barn and several outbuildings. Fields of wheat rippled in the breeze, and she could see the shapes of cattle grazing in a fenced pasture. It looked like prosperity and safety, and everything Emma had been dreaming of for days. They rode into the yard, and immediately the cabin door opened. A woman stepped out, middle-aged and sturdy, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of James and his passenger. "James Cartwright!" she called out. "What in the Lord's name have you got there?" "Found her on the trail, Mrs. Patterson," James said, dismounting and then carefully lifting Emma down. "This is Emma Hartley. Her husband died of fever 4 days back, left her stranded. She's 7 months pregnant, been walking with no supplies, and her feet are in bad shape. I thought you might be willing to help." "Mrs.?" Patterson was already moving toward them, her face shifting from surprise to professional concern. Of course. Lord have mercy, child. You look half dead. Let's get you inside right now. Thomas," she called over her shoulder. "Thomas, come help James with that horse." A man appeared from the barn, tall and weathered, who Emma assumed was Mr. Patterson. He and James led Lucky away, while Mrs. Patterson took Emma's arm with surprising gentleness and guided her into the cabin. The interior was dim and blessedly cool after the heat outside. Mrs. Patterson led Emma to a rocking chair near the stone fireplace and eased her into it. "Now then," she said, her voice brisk but kind, "let's have a look at you. James said your feet are hurt?" Emma nodded, and Mrs. Patterson knelt down, unwrapping the bandages James had applied. She made a soft sound of disapproval as the damage was revealed. "These are badly torn up, but whoever tended them knew what they were doing. The infection is minimal. Was it James who doctored you?" "Yes, ma'am. He had salve. That Shoshone mix of his, I'd wager. It's good stuff. Now let me check the rest of you." Mrs. Patterson's examination was thorough but gentle. She felt Emma's belly checking the baby's position, and listened with her ear pressed against Emma's stomach. Finally, she sat back on her heels and nodded. "Well, you've been through hell and back, that's for certain. But the baby seems strong and healthy, and you're not showing signs of early labor. Your feet will heal, though they'll be tender for a while yet. What you need most is rest, good food, and plenty of water. How long since you ate properly?" "James fed me last night and this morning," Emma said. "Before that, it had been 2 days." Mrs. Patterson's mouth thinned. "Then we'll get some more food into you right away. You'll stay here until you're stronger. Don't even think about arguing," she added, as Emma opened her mouth to protest. "We've got room, and I won't send a pregnant woman back out on the trail. Now, let me get you something to eat while the men tend the horse." She bustled off toward what Emma assumed was the kitchen area, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts. Through the window, she could see James and Mr. Patterson in the barn doorway, talking. James gestured as he spoke, clearly explaining the situation, and Mr. Patterson nodded along, his expression grave but understanding. Mrs. Patterson returned with a plate of cold chicken, fresh bread, and butter, along with a glass of milk so cold it must have come from a spring house. Emma ate slowly this time, savoring each bite. Real food prepared in a real kitchen tasted like heaven after days of deprivation. The men came in after a while, and Mr. Patterson gave Emma a kind nod. "You're welcome here as long as you need, Mrs. Hartley. Any friend of James's is a friend of ours." "Thank you," Emma said. "I don't know how I'll repay your kindness." "No repayment needed," Mr. Patterson said firmly. "We help who needs helping out here. That's how folks survive in this country. James caught Emma's eye and smiled, and she felt that strange flutter in her chest again. He looked relieved, she realized. He had been genuinely worried about her. Mrs. Patterson showed Emma to a small bedroom off the main room. "This was our daughter's room before she married," she explained. "She lives in Laramie now with her husband. You rest here, and I'll bring you some hot water so you can wash up properly. Then I want you to sleep. You look like you haven't had proper rest in a week." She was right. Emma washed herself as well as she could with the basin of hot water Mrs. Patterson brought, marveling at the luxury of soap and a clean cloth. Then she lay down on the narrow bed, which felt impossibly soft after nights on the hard ground, and was asleep almost instantly. She woke to the smell of cooking and the low murmur of voices from the main room. The light coming through the window was the golden color of late afternoon, which meant she had slept for several hours. Emma sat up slowly, taking stock of her body. Everything still hurt, but it was a distant hurt now, the kind that spoke of healing rather than active damage. She made her way back to the main room and found James, Mr. Patterson, and Mrs. Patterson sitting around the table. They all looked up as she entered, and James immediately stood, pulling out a chair for her. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Much better, thank you." Emma settled into the chair, accepting the cup of water Mrs. Patterson slid toward her. "How long did I sleep?" "About 4 hours," Mrs. Patterson said. "Which is good. Your body needs rest to heal. Now, we've been discussing your situation, and here's what we think. You should stay here for at least a week, maybe 2, until you're fully recovered. Then, if you want, we can help you get to Casper or wherever you're planning to go." "I don't have any plans," Emma admitted, "or any money. My husband spent what little we had on supplies, and most of those are back with the broken wagon." "Where was your wagon?" James asked. Emma described the location as best she could, and James and Mr. Patterson exchanged a look. "I could probably find it," James said slowly. "If there are supplies there, they're rightfully yours, might be worth salvaging." "That would mean you going out of your way," Emma protested. "You're already late getting back to the ranch." "A few more days won't matter," James said, "and you need those supplies." "Mr. Patterson nodded. "Makes sense. James, why don't you and I ride out tomorrow morning? If we start early, we should be able to find the wagon, salvage what's useful, and be back by nightfall. Emma can rest here with my wife." It was decided, despite Emma's protests, that she did not want to cause more trouble. That evening, Mrs. Patterson made a feast of fried chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, fresh biscuits, and green beans from her garden. Emma ate until she thought she would burst, savoring every bite. Across the table, James caught her eye and winked, and she found herself smiling back without thinking. After supper, they sat outside on the porch, watching the sun set in spectacular fashion across the plains. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson had gone inside to clean up, leaving James and Emma alone in the cooling evening air. "This is a beautiful place," Emma said quietly. "It is," James agreed. "The Pattersons have worked hard to build what they have here. They're good people." "Like you," James glanced at her, surprised. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." "No," Emma said firmly. "You're doing what a good man would do. There's a difference." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of evening settling over the ranch. Finally, James said, "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Of course. What will you do, after you've recovered, I mean? Do you have family somewhere?" Emma shook her head. "My parents died of diphtheria when I was 16. I have a brother, but he went to California 5 years ago, and I haven't heard from him since. Samuel had family in Nebraska, but they never approved of our marriage. I doubt they'd welcome me back, especially with a baby." "So you're alone?" "Yes." The word hung heavy between them. "I've been trying not to think about it too much. One day at a time, you know." James was quiet, and Emma could feel him thinking. Finally, he said, "You could come to Casper. It's a good town, growing fast. There are opportunities there. Maybe you could find work or—" He trailed off, and Emma looked at him questioningly. "Or what?" "Or you could consider staying nearby," James said, his voice careful. "The Pattersons might know of folks who need help, and if you were nearby, I could check on you sometimes, make sure you and the baby were all right." Emma's heart beat faster. "You'd want to do that?" James met her eyes, and in the fading light, his expression was intense. "Emma, I know this is going to sound crazy. We've known each other barely more than a day, but yes, I'd want to do that. I'd want to know you were safe and cared for." "Why?" Emma whispered. James took a breath, as if steeling himself. "Because somewhere between finding you under that cottonwood tree and right now, I started caring about what happens to you. I know it's not practical, and I know you're in no position to be thinking about such things. You're grieving your husband and dealing with being pregnant and alone, but I can't help how I feel." Emma's mind was spinning. She should tell him it was too soon, that she was not ready for this, that he was being foolish. But the truth was, she felt it too. That pull, that connection that had sparked between them almost from the first moment. And unlike with Samuel, this felt real and warm and right. "James," she said slowly, "I'm not grieving my husband, not the way you might think. Samuel and I were married out of necessity, not love. I cared for him in my way, and I'm sorry he's dead, but I'm not heartbroken. Does that make me a terrible person?" "No," James said immediately. "It makes you honest." "Then I'll be honest about something else," Emma said, her courage rising. "I feel it too, this thing between us. And it scares me because I've only ever known one kind of marriage, the practical kind, and this feels different. But I like different. I like how you make me feel." James's face transformed, hope and wonder lighting his features. "Yeah? Yeah." Emma found herself smiling, despite everything. "But James, I'm 7 months pregnant with another man's child. I have nothing to my name. I can't ask you to take that on." "You're not asking," James said. "I'm offering. And Emma, I know it's fast. I know we need time to get to know each other properly. But I also know that out here, sometimes you have to grab onto good things when they come along, because the world is hard and uncertain, and good things are rare. So here's what I'm thinking. You recover here with us Pattersons. I go back to the ranch, explain the situation to Jack Morrison, then I come back and we figure this out together. We take it slow, we court proper, and we see where it goes. What do you say?" Emma looked at this man, this cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere and saved her life in more ways than one. She thought about the gentleness of his hands when he bandaged her feet, the protective way he had watched over her through the night, the wonder in his eyes when he felt her baby kick. She thought about the alternative, facing motherhood alone with no money and no prospects. But more than that, she thought about how she felt when she looked at him, warm and safe and hopeful for the first time in longer than she could remember. "All right," she said softly. "Let's see where it goes." James's answering smile was like the sun coming up. He reached for her hand, and Emma gave it to him, feeling his calloused fingers close around hers. They sat like that as full dark fell, holding hands on the porch, and Emma felt something in her chest unclench, something that had been tight and afraid for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to be without it. The next morning, James and Mr. Patterson left before dawn to search for Emma's abandoned wagon. Emma watched them ride out, her hand raised in farewell, feeling both anxious and oddly bereft at James's departure. Mrs. Patterson noticed and smiled knowingly. "He'll be back before you know it," she said. "And in the meantime, we have work to do. Can you sew?" Emma spent the day with Mrs. Patterson, who turned out to be a fount of practical wisdom and kindly advice. They sewed baby clothes from soft fabric Mrs. Patterson had been saving, simple gowns and blankets that would be needed in a few months. As they worked, Mrs. Patterson talked about her own experiences with childbirth and motherhood, offering tips and reassurance that eased some of Emma's anxieties. "You'll do fine," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "You're a strong girl, and strength is what matters most in childbirth. When your time comes, I'll be there to help you if you want. I've delivered more babies than I can count." "I'd like that," Emma said gratefully. "I've been so scared, doing this alone." "Well, you're not alone anymore, are you? You've got James looking after you, and you've got us. And something tells me that young man isn't going to let anything happen to you or that baby." "You think he's serious?" Emma asked quietly. "About wanting to court me properly?" Mrs. Patterson looked at her over her sewing. "Child, I've known James Cartwright since he was 18 years old and first came to work at the Circle M. I've seen him with sweethearts and dance hall girls and all manner of women. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. That boy is smitten, and I'd say it's the real thing." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "It's so fast, though. We barely know each other." "Sometimes that's how it works out here," Mrs. Patterson said. "The West doesn't allow for long courtships and careful planning. You meet someone good, and you hold on to them. My Thomas proposed to me after knowing me for 2 weeks. That was 35 years ago, and I've never regretted saying yes. The sun was setting when they heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Emma rushed to the window and saw James and Mr. Patterson riding in, a pack horse loaded with supplies trailing behind them. Her heart leaped at the sight of James, dusty and tired but smiling. They had found the wagon, James explained over supper. Most of it was beyond salvaging, but they had recovered her and Samuel's personal belongings, including Emma's small trunk of clothes, Samuel's tools, and the cooking supplies. James presented it all to her with obvious pride. "It's not much," he said, "but it's yours." Emma opened her trunk with trembling hands and found the few treasures she owned: her mother's Bible, a cameo brooch that had belonged to her grandmother, 2 decent dresses, and the quilt her mother had made for her wedding. She had thought it was all lost, and seeing these pieces of her past made her eyes sting with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have no idea what this means to me." James touched her shoulder gently. "I'm glad we could get them back for you." That night, James announced he would be heading back to the Circle M the next morning. "I need to explain the situation to Jack and make arrangements," he said, "but I'll be back in a week, 2 at most. Is that all right?" Emma nodded, trying to ignore the sinking feeling in her stomach at the thought of him leaving. "Of course, you have responsibilities." "Emma!" James waited until she looked at him. "I'm coming back, I promise." The next morning came too quickly. Emma walked out to see James off, her emotions in turmoil. He finished saddling Lucky, then turned to her, his expression serious. "You'll be safe here," he said. "The Pattersons will take good care of you, and I'll be back before you know it." "Be careful," Emma said. "The trail can be dangerous." "I've ridden it 100 times. I'll be fine." James hesitated, then stepped closer. "Emma, can I write to you? If I send letters to the Patterson place, will you write back?" "Yes," Emma said immediately. "I'd like that." "Good." James smiled, then did something that made Emma's breath catch. He leaned down and kissed her forehead, gentle and sweet. "Take care of yourself and that baby. I'll see you soon." Then he was swinging into the saddle and riding away, and Emma stood watching until he disappeared over the horizon. Mrs. Patterson came to stand beside her, slipping a supportive arm around Emma's shoulders. "He'll be back," she said. "That boy is head over heels." The week that followed was peaceful in a way Emma had almost forgotten existed. She rested, ate regular meals, and felt her strength returning day by day. Her feet healed, the baby kicked vigorously, and she found herself falling into the rhythm of life on the Patterson homestead. She helped Mrs. Patterson with cooking and sewing, took short walks around the property, and spent evenings on the porch watching the spectacular prairie sunsets. On the 5th day after James left, a rider arrived with a letter. Emma's hands shook as she opened it, recognizing James's bold handwriting. "Dear Emma," it read. "I arrived safely at the Circle M and spoke with Jack Morrison. He's a good man, and when I explained the situation, he was understanding. I'm taking a month's leave to come back and help you get settled properly. Jack says I've earned it after 5 years of faithful service. I should arrive at the Patterson place around the 15th of August. Until then, know that I'm thinking of you constantly. The other hands tease me for being distracted, but I don't care. Take care of yourself. Yours, James." Emma read the letter 3 times, then pressed it to her chest, smiling like a fool. Mrs. Patterson saw her expression and laughed. "Good news, I take it?" "He's coming back," Emma said. "He's taking a month's leave to help me." "That boy has it bad," Mrs. Patterson said with satisfaction. "Now, we'd better make sure you have something nice to wear when he gets here. Let's see about altering one of your dresses to fit better." August 15th arrived hot and clear. Emma woke that morning with butterflies in her stomach. Unable to eat breakfast despite Mrs. Patterson's scolding, she changed her dress 3 times, finally settling on her blue calico that Mrs. Patterson had altered to accommodate her expanding belly. She brushed her hair until it shone, then sat on the porch to wait, unable to focus on anything else. James arrived just past noon, and Emma's heart soared at the sight of him. He looked the same, but somehow different, maybe just because she had missed him so much. He dismounted before Lucky had fully stopped, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. "Emma," he said, and his voice was warm with happiness. "Lord, you look wonderful." "So do you," Emma said, and suddenly they were both laughing, giddy with the joy of reunion. James had brought gifts, a bolt of soft white cotton for more baby clothes, a book of poems because he remembered her mentioning she liked to read, and a small wooden rattle he had carved himself during the long evenings at the bunkhouse. "I wanted to bring more," he said almost shyly, "but I wasn't sure what you'd need." "This is perfect," Emma assured him, turning the little rattle over in her hands. It was smoothly carved and painted with cheerful colors, clearly made with care. "Did you really make this?" "I like working with wood when I have spare time," James admitted. "It's soothing." They fell back into easy companionship, as if the week apart had been nothing. James helped Mr. Patterson with chores around the homestead, while Emma continued recovering and preparing for the baby. But the evenings were theirs, spent sitting on the porch talking about everything and nothing. Emma learned about James's childhood, how he had struggled after his parents died, determined to keep his sister with him and safe. He talked about his years cowboying, the good times and the hard ones, the lessons he had learned about survival and honor and doing what was right. He told her about his dreams of someday having his own place, a small ranch where he could raise horses and cattle and build something lasting. In turn, Emma told him about her life, her childhood on her father's cattle ranch before he switched to farming, her mother's death, her practical marriage to Samuel. She told him about her stillborn daughter, the grief that had nearly crushed her, and her fear of losing this baby too. James listened to it all, his face grave and understanding, and when she cried, he held her hand and let her talk it through. "You won't lose this baby," he said with quiet conviction. "This one is strong, I can tell." "How can you possibly know that?" "Because this baby has you for a mother," James said simply. "Any child that can survive what you've been through is a fighter." One evening, about a week after James's return, they were sitting on the porch as usual when James said, "Emma, I need to talk to you about the future, about what happens after the baby is born." Emma's stomach clenched. This was the conversation she had been both anticipating and dreading. "All right." James took a breath. "I've been thinking about this a lot. I talked to Jack Morrison, and he says there's a small cabin on Circle M land, about 5 miles from the main ranch house. It used to be for a line rider, but it's been empty for a year. Jack says if I want it, I can have it. It needs work, but it's sturdy. 4 rooms, a good well, and enough land around it for a garden, and maybe some chickens." He paused, looking at her intently. "Emma, I'm going to file a homestead claim on the land around that cabin. It's good land, and with the cabin already there, I'll have a head start on the improvements required. I'll still work for the Circle M, but I'll have my own place too. And I'm hoping, that is, I'm asking if you would consider sharing that place with me." Emma's heart was pounding. "James, are you asking me to marry you?" "Not yet," James said carefully. "Not until after the baby is born, and you've had time to recover and make sure this is really what you want. But yes, eventually, that's what I'm asking. I'm asking if you'll let me court you proper, and if at the end of that courtship, you find you could love me, if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife." Emma looked at this good, honest man who had saved her life and offered her a future. She thought about the alternative, trying to make it alone as a woman with an infant in a country that was not kind to women without protection. But more than that, she thought about how she felt when she was with James. Safe, yes, but also happy. Excited about tomorrow, hopeful. "I find that I could love you very easily," she said softly. "In fact, I think I'm already halfway there." James's face lit up like a sunrise. Yeah. Emma smiled through sudden tears. "But James, you understand what you're taking on, don't you? This baby isn't yours. People will know that. They'll talk." "Let them talk," James said firmly. "This baby will be mine in every way that matters. I'll raise this child as my own, love it as my own. If you'll have me, Emma, I'll be the father your baby needs." Emma could not help it. She started crying in earnest, great gulping sobs of relief and joy and hope. James moved closer, putting his arm around her shoulders and letting her cry against his chest. "We're going to be all right," he murmured into her hair. "All 3 of us. I promise you, Emma. We're going to build something good." They spent the rest of August at the Patterson place, courting in the old-fashioned way. James was unfailingly respectful, never pushing for more than Emma was ready to give, but making his feelings clear through 1,000 small gestures. He brought her wildflowers picked from the prairie. He read to her in the evenings from the book of poems he had given her. He talked to her belly, telling the baby stories about the ranch and the horses, and the beautiful country they would call home. Emma felt herself falling deeper in love with each passing day. This was so different from her marriage to Samuel, which had been all duty and practicality. With James, there was warmth and laughter and genuine affection. When he looked at her, she felt beautiful despite her ungainly pregnant shape. When he touched her hand, she felt cherished. When he talked about their future together, she felt hope rising like water from a spring. As August turned to September, James began making trips to the line cabin, working to fix it up. He took Mr. Patterson with him several times, and Emma waited anxiously each time for their return, eager to hear about the progress. "It's coming along," James reported one evening. "The roof needed patching and the chimney needed work, but the bones of the place are good. I'm building a proper bedstead and a cradle for the baby. Mr. Patterson is helping me put in some shelves and a better kitchen area. Another few weeks and it'll be ready." "I wish I could see it," Emma said wistfully. "Soon," James promised. "Once it's finished and once you're a bit stronger, I'll take you there, but not before. I want it to be perfect when you first see it." In mid-September, Emma woke one night to a strange sensation. At first, she thought it was just the baby moving, but then she realized her nightgown was wet. Her water had broken. Terror seized her, and she called out for Mrs. Patterson. The older woman appeared immediately, already dressed, as if she had been expecting this. "It's your time," she said calmly. "Don't be frightened. First babies take a while. Let's get you up and moving." Mr. Patterson was sent to fetch James from the barn where he had been sleeping. He appeared, rumpled and worried, and Mrs. Patterson shooed him toward the door. "This is women's work," she said firmly. "You go boil water and make yourself useful, and pray if you're the praying kind." The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. Emma had thought she understood what labor would be like from her first pregnancy, but that baby had come too early, small and weak. This one was full-term and vigorous, and the labor was intense and exhausting. Mrs. Patterson coached her through each contraction, holding her hand and offering encouragement. "You're doing fine," she kept saying, "strong and steady. This baby is coming, and you're going to do just fine." Dawn was breaking when Emma finally felt the overwhelming urge to push. Mrs. Patterson examined her and nodded with satisfaction. "All right, girl, it's time. When the next pain comes, you push with everything you've got." Emma bore down, screaming with effort, once, twice, 3 times. Then suddenly there was a release and a different kind of cry, high and outraged. Mrs. Patterson was laughing. "It's a boy," she announced, holding up a squirming, red-faced infant. "A big, healthy boy with a good set of lungs." Emma was crying and laughing at the same time as Mrs. Patterson laid the baby on her chest. He was perfect, absolutely perfect, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably lighten, but were currently dark blue. He was screaming his head off, which Mrs. Patterson said was exactly what he should be doing. "Let me clean him up and then you can feed him," Mrs. Patterson said. "You did wonderful, Emma, just wonderful." A few minutes later, there was a tentative knock on the door. "Can I come in?" James's voice was anxious. "Just a moment," Mrs. Patterson called. She made sure Emma was decent, the baby wrapped in one of the blankets they had sewn together. Then she opened the door and beckoned James in. He approached slowly, his eyes wide and wondering. "Emma, are you all right?" "I'm perfect," Emma said, her voice hoarse but happy. "Come meet your son." James's face did something complicated, a mixture of emotions Emma could not quite name. He came to the bedside and looked down at the baby in Emma's arms. "He's so small," he whispered. "He's actually quite big for a newborn," Mrs. Patterson said with amusement. "Near 8 pounds, I'd wager, but yes, they always seem impossibly tiny at first." "Can I hold him?" James asked hesitantly. Emma nodded, showing him how to support the baby's head. James took the infant with the careful reverence of someone holding something infinitely precious. He gazed down at the little face, and Emma saw his eyes go bright with unshed tears. "Hello there," James said softly. "Hello, little man. I'm James. I'm going to take care of you and your mama. That's a promise." The baby, who had been fussing, quieted at the sound of James's voice. His little eyes opened, seeming to focus on James's face. They stared at each other for a long moment, and Emma felt her heart swell with love for both of them. "What will you name him?" Mrs. Patterson asked. Emma had been thinking about this. I'd like to call him William, she said. After my father, William James, if that's all right with you, James. James looked up from the baby, his expression stunned. You want to give him my name? He'll have your name eventually anyway, Emma said. When we marry, I'd like him to have it from the start. James's face crumpled slightly and he blinked hard. I'd be honored, he managed. William James Hartley. It's a good, strong name. Hartley for now, Emma said quietly. Cartwright soon. James smiled through his tears. Cartwright soon, he agreed. Emma recovered quickly from the birth, helped by Mrs. Patterson's expert care and good food. Baby William was a healthy, hungry child who ate and slept on a schedule that Emma found manageable. James was besotted with the infant, spending every spare moment holding him, talking to him, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. I know he can't understand me yet, James said one evening as he rocked William, but I like to think he knows my voice. He does, Emma assured him. Babies know more than we think. He knows you already. In early October, James announced that the cabin was finished. It's not fancy, he warned Emma, but it's solid and clean and ready for us. If you're feeling strong enough, I'd like to take you and William to see it. They made the journey in a wagon James borrowed from the Pattersons, with Emma and the baby settled comfortably in the back on a pile of blankets. It was a beautiful day, crisp and clear, with the aspens turning gold on the distant hills. Emma held William close, pointing out the landscape to him, even though he was far too young to appreciate it. The cabin sat in a little valley with a creek running through it, protected from the worst of the winter winds by a stand of pine trees. It was made of sturdy logs with a peaked roof and a stone chimney. There was a small barn, a chicken coop, and a garden plot already fenced and ready for planting come spring. It was modest, but to Emma, it looked like paradise. James helped her down from the wagon and led her inside. The single main room was dominated by a large fireplace, with a kitchen area on one side and a sitting area on the other. A door led to a bedroom, where James had built a beautiful bed frame and a cradle that sat beside it, both smoothly sanded and polished. There was even a rocking chair positioned near the window. James, Emma breathed, it's wonderful. You really think so? He sounded anxious. I know it's small, and there's still work to do, but... Emma silenced him by standing on her tiptoes and kissing him. It was their first real kiss, and it was sweet and warm and full of promise. When they broke apart, James was smiling. I'll take that as approval, he said. It's perfect, Emma told him. Absolutely perfect. When can we move in? Whenever you're ready, James said. But Emma, there's something else I need to say first. He took her hand, and she noticed he was trembling slightly. I was going to wait longer, give us more time for courting. But I look at you holding William, and I look at this cabin, and I realize I don't want to wait anymore. Emma Hartley, will you marry me? Will you be my wife and let me be William's father? Emma felt tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, she said. Yes, absolutely yes. James pulled her into his arms, careful of the baby between them, and held her tight. I'll make you happy, he promised. I swear I'll spend every day trying to make you happy. You already do, Emma whispered against his chest. They were married 3 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the Patterson homestead, with Mr. and Mrs. Patterson as witnesses. Emma wore her best dress, altered once more to fit her post-pregnancy figure, and carried wildflowers that James had picked that morning. James wore a new shirt he had bought in Casper, and he was so nervous he stumbled over his vows twice, making everyone laugh. But when the traveling preacher who served the scattered homesteads in the area pronounced them man and wife, and James kissed Emma with joyful reverence, there was not a dry eye present. Even Mr. Patterson had to wipe at his face. They moved into the cabin that evening, beginning their life together as a family. That first night, with William asleep in his cradle and the fire crackling in the hearth, James and Emma lay together in their marriage bed and talked about the future. I want to expand the cabin, James said, running his fingers through Emma's hair. Add another room or two as we need them, and I want to build up a good herd of cattle, maybe some horses. I want to make this place into something real and lasting. We will, Emma said confidently. We have time, and we have each other. We can build anything. And more children, James said quietly. If you want them. If it's not too frightening after everything you've been through. Emma thought about her stillborn daughter, about the terror of giving birth to William alone in her mind, if not in body. but she also thought about the joy of holding her son, about the love she felt growing every day for this man beside her. "I want more children," she said. "Your children, brothers and sisters for William." James smiled and pulled her close. "Then we'll have them. As many as come to us, and we'll love everyone." The winter that followed was hard but happy. James worked for the Circle M through the week, riding back to the cabin each night no matter the weather. Emma kept the home, caring for William and learning the rhythms of this new life. They struggled sometimes, with money tight and the work endless, but they struggled together, and that made all the difference. Spring came with a rush of green and the birth of their first calf. James had bought 3 pregnant cows with his savings, and now they had 4 animals, the beginnings of a real herd. Emma planted a garden with seeds Mrs. Patterson had given her, and they acquired chickens that provided fresh eggs. William grew rapidly, becoming a happy, chubby baby who smiled at everything and everyone. He learned to recognize James's voice and would light up whenever his father came home. James doted on him shamelessly, playing with him every evening and telling him stories about the ranch and the animals. In August, almost a year after they first met, Emma realized she was pregnant again. She told James over supper, watching nervously for his reaction. He stared at her for a moment, then whooped with joy, sweeping her up and spinning her around the kitchen. "Another baby!" he exclaimed. "Emma, that's wonderful." "You're not worried?" Emma asked. "About the expense or the work?" "We'll manage," James said confidently. "We always do. Oh, Emma, I'm so happy I could burst." This pregnancy was easier than the first, with Emma well fed and cared for, free from stress and fear. She continued her work around the homestead through the winter, with Mrs. Patterson checking on her regularly and James watching over her like a mother hen. In April of 1885, Emma gave birth to a daughter. The labor was shorter and easier than William's had been, and when Mrs. Patterson placed the baby in Emma's arms, Emma burst into happy tears. This little girl was alive and healthy, screaming with vigor, and she had James's dark hair and what would probably be his dark eyes. "She's perfect," James said, his voice choked with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." They named her Caroline, after James's mother, and if William had been doted on, Caroline was positively worshipped. James was enchanted by his daughter, marveling at her tiny features and the strong grip of her little hands. William, now 18 months old and toddling everywhere, was fascinated by his new sister, wanting to touch her constantly with gentle, curious fingers. The years rolled by, marked by hard work and steady growth. James proved to have a gift for horses, and he began training them on the side, selling well-broken animals to neighboring ranches. The money from this venture allowed them to expand their herd and improve the cabin. They added 2 more rooms, a proper parlor, and another bedroom, and James built a fine barn to replace the ramshackle original. Emma discovered she had a talent for cheese making, and her products became sought after in Casper. Between James's horses and Emma's cheese, they carved out a comfortable living, not wealthy, but secure. More children came. Samuel, born in 1887, named not for Emma's first husband as some assumed, but for James's father, who had borne the same name. Then twin girls, Lily and Rose, born in 1889, who looked exactly alike and drove everyone to distraction with their mischief. Finally, in 1892, another son, Thomas, named for Mr. Patterson, who had become like a father to both James and Emma. Their home was loud and chaotic and full of love. William grew into a thoughtful, responsible boy who adored his younger siblings and showed a gift for working with the cattle. Caroline was fierce and independent, insisting on learning to ride almost before she could walk. The younger children tumbled around the homestead like a pack of puppies, getting into everything and keeping their parents constantly busy. Through it all, James and Emma's love deepened and matured. They had their disagreements, of course, their moments of frustration and exhaustion, but they faced everything together, supporting each other through hard times and celebrating the good times with equal fervor. One evening in the summer of 1895, they sat on their porch watching the sunset, just as they had done so many times before. The children were all in bed, the chores were done, and it was just the 2 of them in the quiet evening air. "Do you remember the day we met?" James asked, taking Emma's hand. "How could I forget?" Emma said. "I thought I was dying, and then you appeared like an answer to a prayer I had been too frightened to speak out loud. I saw you under that cottonwood tree, and something just clicked into place," James said. Like I had been waiting my whole life without knowing what I was waiting for, and suddenly there you were. Emma squeezed his hand. Best day of my life, even though it was also one of the worst, because it brought me to you. We've built something good here, James said, looking out at their land. Better than I ever dreamed possible. We have, Emma agreed, and we're not done yet. There are still dreams to chase, children to raise, years ahead of us. Years ahead of us, James echoed, smiling. He turned to look at her, his eyes warm with love. You know, I never get tired of looking at you. 12 years, 6 children, and you're still the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Emma laughed. You're biased. Absolutely, James agreed, and I wouldn't have it any other way. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. From inside the cabin came a sleepy murmur, one of the twins talking in her sleep, and they both smiled. Our life, Emma said softly. Against all odds, we built this life. Together, James added. That's the key. Together, we can do anything. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Emma rested her head on James's shoulder and thought about the journey that had brought them here. The loss and fear and desperate struggle, yes, but also the unexpected joy. The love that had bloomed in the middle of hardship. The family they had created against all odds. William, their firstborn, had just turned 12. He had never known that James was not his biological father, and why would he? James had been there from the beginning, had chosen to be his father with full knowledge and open heart. The other children had come from James's body, but James loved them all equally, without distinction or favoritism. They were his, all of them, and he was theirs. The homestead continued to prosper. By 1898, they had expanded their land holdings through James's homestead claim and additional purchases, until they owned a respectable ranch of nearly 300 acres. Their cattle herd numbered over 50 head, and James's reputation as a horse trainer had spread throughout the territory. Emma's cheese was sold as far away as Cheyenne, bringing in steady income that she carefully saved and invested. The children grew and thrived. William, at 15, was already nearly as tall as his father, with the same quiet strength and kind eyes. He had developed a particular affinity for the cattle, able to calm even the most fractious steer with his steady presence. James had begun teaching him the intricacies of ranch management, preparing him for the day when this land would be his. Caroline, at 13, was a force of nature. She could outride most of the boys in the county, could shoot straight, and had a head for figures that impressed even her mother. She talked constantly about going east for education, and though it pained Emma to think of her daughter so far away, she and James had promised to make it happen if that was what Caroline truly wanted. Samuel, at 11, was the dreamer of the family, always with his nose in a book when he could sneak away from chores. He talked about becoming a lawyer or maybe a teacher, something that would let him work with his mind rather than his hands. James encouraged this, even as he made sure Samuel knew how to work the ranch. A man should know how to do everything, James said, even if he chooses to do something specific. The twins, Lily and Rose, were 9 and absolutely inseparable. They had developed their own language that only they understood, finishing each other's sentences and seeming to communicate without words. They were mischievous and clever, keeping everyone on their toes with their elaborate schemes and pranks. Young Thomas, at 6, was still the baby, though he protested vigorously whenever anyone called him that. He followed his older siblings everywhere, trying desperately to keep up, and showed signs of inheriting his father's gift with horses. The cabin had been expanded and improved until it was truly a house, a solid 2-story structure with 6 bedrooms, a proper dining room, and even a small library where Samuel could indulge his love of reading. Emma had furnished it slowly over the years, adding curtains and rugs and the small touches that turned a building into a home. One evening in the spring of 1900, the family gathered for supper around the large table James had built with his own hands. It was a lively meal, with everyone talking over each other, sharing news of their day. William had helped deliver a difficult calf. Caroline had won a shooting competition against boys twice her age. The twins had gotten into the honey pot and were covered in sticky sweetness. Thomas had fallen into the creek and needed a complete change of clothes. James sat at the head of the table, Emma at the foot, and looked at the chaos of their family with satisfaction. This was what he had dreamed of during those long, lonely years of cowboying before Emma, Not just children, though he loved them beyond measure, but this sense of belonging, of purpose, of building something that would outlast him. After supper, as the children scattered to their evening chores, Emma and James found themselves alone in the kitchen. Emma was washing dishes and James was drying, a comfortable routine they had developed over the years. "I heard from Caroline's teacher today," Emma said. "She says Caroline is ready for more advanced education than the local school can provide. She recommends we send her to the academy in Cheyenne next year." James was quiet for a moment, processing this. "That's far away." "I know, but James, she's so bright. We can't hold her back because we'll miss her." "I know," James sighed. "You're right. If Caroline wants to go, we'll make it happen. We'll figure out the finances and we'll let her fly." Emma set down the plate she was washing and turned to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "When did our babies get so grown up?" James pulled her into his arms, heedless of his wet hands. "Too fast, way too fast. But Emma, look at them. They're good kids, strong and smart and kind. We did that. You and me together, we raised them right." "We did," Emma agreed, resting her head against his chest. "They're going to be fine, aren't they, out there in the world?" "They're going to be better than fine," James said with conviction. "They have your strength and, if I may say so, my practicality. They know how to work hard and how to treat people right. That's all anyone needs to make it in this world." The turn of the century brought changes to their part of Wyoming. The wild frontier days were fading into memory, replaced by growing towns, telephone lines, and even talk of automobiles. The ranch prospered as markets improved and transportation became more reliable. James hired on several hands to help with the increasing work, young cowboys who reminded him of his own younger days. Caroline did go to the academy in Cheyenne in the fall of 1901, and her letters home were full of excitement about her studies. She excelled in mathematics and science, impressing her teachers and making her parents proud. She came home for summers and holidays, bringing tales of city life that fascinated her younger siblings. William, now 18, had grown into a fine young man. He had his mother's green eyes and his father's steady temperament. He courted a girl from a neighboring ranch, the daughter of one of James's old cowboy friends. And, in the spring of 1902, he announced his engagement. James and Emma gave their blessing gladly, seeing the love between the young couple. The wedding was held at the ranch in June, with half the county in attendance. Emma cried as she watched her firstborn speak his vows, thinking about the tiny baby who had come into the world during such desperate circumstances, who had never known anything but love and security. James held her hand throughout the ceremony, his own eyes suspiciously bright. After the wedding, William and his new bride, Sarah, built a small house on the far end of the ranch property. They would help run the ranch, working alongside James and eventually taking over as James and Emma grew older. It was the natural progression of things, and though it made Emma feel old, it also filled her with satisfaction. This land would stay in the family, passed down through generations. More grandchildren came. William and Sarah had a daughter in 1903, Emma Marie, named for her grandmother. Caroline finished her schooling and returned home, but only to announce that she had been accepted to a teacher's college in Colorado. Samuel, as expected, left for law school in 1904. The twins remained at home for now, helping their mother with the house and the cheese business, though they talked constantly about opening their own store someday. Thomas, following his passion for horses, apprenticed himself to his father, learning everything James could teach him about training and breeding. At 16, he could break a horse as well as any man twice his age, with a gentle hand and infinite patience that the animals responded to. Through all these changes, James and Emma remained the constant center. They had aged, of course, their hair graying, lines deepening around their eyes, but their love had only grown stronger, tempered by years of partnership and tested by the inevitable challenges of life. They still sat on their porch most evenings, watching the sun set over their land. Sometimes they talked, and sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, holding hands and enjoying the peace. The children might be grown or growing, but the love between James and Emma was as fresh and vital as it had been that first night under the stars. One evening in the summer of 1910, they sat together celebrating their 27th anniversary. The house was full, as it often was, with children and grandchildren, and friends gathered for a party. There was music and dancing and laughter, the sound of family and community that had become the soundtrack of their lives. As the party wound down and the guests departed, Emma and James found themselves on their porch once more, this time with several of their grandchildren asleep in various rooms of the house. The night was warm and clear, the stars brilliant overhead. 27 years, Emma said wonderingly. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like forever. The best 27 years of my life, James said. Every single day, even the hard ones, I've been grateful I found you under that cottonwood tree. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had ridden a different way that day? Emma asked. If you had never found me? James was quiet for a moment. Sometimes, he admitted, but I don't like to think about it too much, because I can't imagine my life without you, without our children, without all of this. It would be a lesser life, empty of the things that matter most. Emma leaned against him, feeling the solid strength of him that had barely diminished despite the years. I was so lost that day, so frightened. I thought I was going to die, and I had made peace with it. And then you appeared, and suddenly I had a reason to keep fighting. We saved each other, James said. That's what I think. You needed rescuing that day, but Emma, you've rescued me too. You gave me a home and a family and a purpose. You made me into the man I always wanted to be. They sat watching the stars wheel slowly overhead, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built a life that exceeded their wildest dreams. They had faced hardship and loss, joy and triumph, and through it all, they had faced it together. I love you, Emma said, the words as heartfelt as the first time she had spoken them, years ago in this very spot. I love you too, James replied, kissing the top of her head. Today, tomorrow, and all the days after. You're my heart, Emma. You always will be. As they sat together in the darkness, surrounded by the life they had built, Emma thought about the young pregnant widow who had stumbled onto this land so many years ago, desperate and alone. She thought about the cowboy who had stopped to help, who had shared his fire, and, in doing so, had shared his entire future. It had been the best decision either of them ever made. The years continued to roll by, bringing more changes and more blessings. Caroline married a fellow teacher and settled in Denver, though she visited often with her husband and children. Samuel became a respected lawyer in Cheyenne, fighting for fair treatment for homesteaders and small ranchers, carrying on the values his parents had instilled in him. The twins did indeed open a store, a successful general goods establishment in Casper that became known throughout the region. Thomas took over the horse training business, expanding it until the Cartwright Ranch was known for producing the finest horses in Wyoming. He married a rancher's daughter and built his own house on the property, raising his children within sight of his parents' home. William and Sarah ran the cattle operation with skill and dedication, and their children, Emma and James's grandchildren, grew up learning the same lessons their father had learned, the same values that had built this place. James and Emma grew older, their pace slowing, but their minds remained sharp and their love undimmed. They handed over more and more of the ranch work to the younger generation, content to advise rather than direct, to watch rather than do. On a warm summer evening in 1920, as they sat on their porch, Emma suddenly laughed. James looked at her questioningly, and she gestured at the sprawling ranch, at the houses dotting their land, at the children and grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren who called this place home. "What is it?" James asked. "I was just thinking," Emma said, "about that day on the trail, when I thought I had lost everything, when I was certain I was going to die alone in the wilderness. If someone had told me then that I would end up here, with all of this, I never would have believed them." James smiled, taking her hand. "Life has a way of surprising us." "It does," Emma agreed. "And James, I want you to know something. Every day since that day under the cottonwood tree, every single day for 37 years, I have been grateful. Grateful that you stopped. Grateful that you cared. Grateful that you loved me and William and all the children we made together. You gave me everything I never knew I needed." James's eyes were bright with emotion. "You gave me the same, Emma. A home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning excited about what the day might bring. I was just a cowboy drifting from job to job before you. You made me into someone with roots, with purpose." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Around them, their world hummed with life, the life they had created together. Children played in the yard, cattle lowed in the distance. the smell of supper cooking drifted from one of the nearby houses. "This is what it was all for," Emma said softly. "All the struggle, all the work, all the fear and pain. It was for this, for family, for love, for building something that will last long after we're gone." "And it will last," James assured her. "Look at our grandchildren, Emma. They're learning the same lessons we taught our children. How to work hard, how to treat people right, how to love fiercely and protect what matters. That legacy is going to continue for generations." As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, they sat together as they had done thousands of times before. They were older now, their bodies marked by decades of hard work and life lived fully. But the connection between them, that spark that had ignited on a desperate day in 1883, burned as bright as ever. "Thank you," Emma whispered, "for sharing your fire with me that day." "Thank you," James replied, "for letting me share my future with you." They sat on their porch until late into the night, two people who had found each other against impossible odds, who had built a love story for the ages in the wild country of Wyoming. They had faced everything together, poverty and prosperity, loss and joy, the struggles of raising children, and the satisfaction of seeing those children grow into fine adults. Their story had begun with a desperate woman alone on the trail and a cowboy who stopped to help. It had grown into something neither could have imagined, a ranch, a family, a legacy of love and hard work that would echo through generations. As they finally made their way inside, James helped Emma up from her chair with the same gentleness he had shown that first night when he bandaged her feet. Emma smiled up at him with the same trust she had given him when she had nothing else to give. "Same time tomorrow?" James asked, their nightly ritual. "Same time tomorrow," Emma confirmed. "Every tomorrow, for as long as we have." And as they closed the door on another day, on another chapter of their extraordinary life together, the Wyoming stars shone down on the ranch they had built, on the family they had created, on the love story that had transformed two desperate, lonely people into something greater than either could have been alone. Their fire had warmed not just one cold night on the prairie, but countless nights over decades. The future he had shared with her that day had expanded into something neither could have predicted: children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, a thriving ranch, a legacy of love. They had taken the worst circumstances and turned them into the best life. They had faced every challenge hand in hand. They had built not just a ranch, but a home, not just a marriage, but a partnership that had withstood every test. And years later, when their descendants gathered and told stories of the old days, they always came back to the same tale: the story of how their grandmother, pregnant and alone on the trail without supplies, had been found by their grandfather, a cowboy who had shared his fire, who had shared everything, who had looked at a desperate stranger and seen his future. It was a love story for the ages, born in the hardest of circumstances, tempered by the challenges of frontier life, and proven true by decades of devotion. It was the kind of story that reminded people what really mattered, not wealth or status, but kindness, love, and the courage to reach out to someone in need. James Cartwright had stopped that day in August of 1883 because he was a good man who could not ride past someone in trouble. Emma Hartley had accepted his help because she had no other choice. But what grew from that chance meeting was so much more than rescue or survival. It was a testament to the power of love, the strength of commitment, and the beautiful things that can bloom even in the harshest soil. Their fire had started with a few sticks of kindling on a desperate night. It had grown into a blaze that warmed generations, that lit the way for countless others, that proved beyond doubt that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we choose to stop, to help, to love. And in the end, that was their legacy. Not just the ranch or the children or the material success, but the simple truth that when you share your fire with someone in need, when you open your heart to possibility, when you choose love over convenience, magic can happen. The cowboy had shared his fire and his future. The woman had shared her strength and her hope. Together, they had built something eternal,